بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبنا المصطفى صلى الله عليه وعلى آله ومن تبعهم بإحسان يوم الدين أما بعد وعن أبي عبد الرحمن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله تعالى عنه قال حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو صادق المصدوق قال إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة ثم يكون علقة مثل ذلك ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح ويؤمر ب4 كلمات بكتب رزقه وأجله وعمله وشقي أو سعيد فوالله الذي لا إله غيره إن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل الجنة حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بأمر أهل النار فيدخلها وإن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل النار حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع فيسبق عليها الكتاب فيعمل بأمر أهل الجنة فيدخلها رواه الإمام البخاري ومسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Today's hadith is narrated on the authenticity of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And we touched upon Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu previously. When we were speaking about Abdullah ibn Umar, we spoke that there were a couple of Abdullahs that were well known at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, including Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. These three Abdullahs were known to be fuqaha of the deen, to have excessive knowledge of the deen, the fiqh knowledge as well as the tafsir of the Quran. And then we also spoke about Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And this hadith is narrated on the authenticity of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, to start off about him, one time Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu had climbed up a tree. And when he had climbed up this tree, his lower garment had crawled up a bit. So his calves were visible. And the other companions, they looked at the calves of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and they began to laugh. And look at his calves are very, very slim and skinny. They had no meat on them. And they began to joke and say that he's very skinny, he has, very, just, the wind blows, it can blow more. And they began to laugh at Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he asked the companions, what are you laughing at? And they said that we're laughing at the calves of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that, I swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the same calves that you are laughing at of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud because they're very slim and skinny, they don't have any meat, they don't have any weight, that these are extremely heavy in the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're extremely heavy in the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the narrator of this hadith, he might have been a very slim and slender man. Just like Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, if you look at the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the physical description of each companion, when you learn the physical description, it helps you paint a better picture of them. Right? As everyone knows about Umar radiallahu ta'ala. As Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he was tall, he had broad shoulders, he was well built, muscular. As Ali radiallahu ta'ala, he had a shorter frame. He was shorter frame, but yet he was built. As Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he was slim and skinny. He was very slim and skinny that when as Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he was in Maradul Wafat, the final illness, he had said that as Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala is the one who he used to lead salah. And as Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, she said that don't have my father lead salah. Why? Because my father's voice is so weak that the people in the back, they won't be able to hear my father when he leads salah. Right? They didn't have the mic. So he said, my father, his voice is not that strong. So as Abu Bakr thought, his physical description was that he was very slim and skinny. Here Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he was also very slim and skinny. And there were companions like Zubayr bin Awam radiallahu ta'ala. Zubayr bin Awam radiallahu ta'ala, his biceps were a normal man's thighs. His biceps were a normal man's thighs. I mean, these people, again, the ones who were built, they were built like a tank. And the ones that were built, their iman was built. They were men of sustenance. Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala, when he became Khalifa, his inaugural speech was, right? Now, the time as Ali became Khalifa, You have to understand that time. Why? Because Hazrat Uthman was been made shaheed. And fitna had just entered Islam. Hazrat Uthman, he was made shaheed. The rebels, they had assassinated Uthman. Hazrat Ali, he was selected as Amir al-Mu'mineen. And they were waiting, the Muslims were waiting that Ali is going to give some sort of speech and some sort of moving lecture that will set the rebels straight and will have everyone on track. And as Ali, he gets up for his inaugural speech and he said, Muslim Ummah, you are in need of a rajulun fa'alun la qawwal. That's it. He said, at this moment in time, you are in need of a man who is fa'alun, who is a man of sustenance, a man who has some weight, who acts. And you don't need somebody who only speaks. Watch what I do now. Watch how I set things straight. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he was a man of sustenance. He was a man of power. He was a man of strength. He was known to be Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Musa al-Ashari radiallahu anhu. Abu Musa al-Ashari radiallahu anhu, he was from Yemen. And he said that when I came from Yemen and I came to the gathering of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I saw Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, and I thought that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he was from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I thought he was Ahlul Bayt. He was a family member. Why? Because he had open access to the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Coming in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, going out the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was always with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they were so close that I thought that he had to be family, right? But they weren't family. And one time Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually said to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that Abdullah, you can enter my house whenever you want. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he knocked on the door of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah, you don't need permission. You're always welcome. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he had some nicknames. He was called Sahibun Na'lain. Sahibun Na'lain. Na'lain are slippers. He would always carry the slippers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam around with him. Right? Whenever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would take his slippers off, over there outside the masjid, we take our shoes off. Right? So he would take the slippers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wouldn't wear his slippers. He was also called Sahibun Miswak. He would hold the miswak of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He will also hold the water of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would come out of his house in the morning for Fajr, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud would be waiting there with water for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, here do with this water, right? So these were especially names that he had, because of his relationship with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud after Islam. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud after Islam. But now let's have a quick peek at Abdullah ibn Mas'ud before Islam. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says that before I accepted Islam, I used to be a shepherd for a man by the name of Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayth. And I used to graze my sheep outside of Makkah al-Mukarramah. And one day I saw Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he was young, he was in his 20s, and he said that one day I saw two elderly men, they were coming, and they came to me and they asked me that, do you have some milk in these goats that we can drink from? There's some goats there, do you have any milk in these goats that we can drink from? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said to these two men that, these goats, they're not mine. I don't own them, they are Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayth's goats. I cannot give you anything from them. And then these two men, one said, then they asked me that, do you have a young goat who doesn't have any milk? A young female goat who doesn't have any milk? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud goes, yeah, I can give you that, but what's the use? You're not going to get any milk from her? And they said, don't worry, bring it. And one man, he got this goat, and the other man, he put his hand on the udder of the goat, and he began to recite something, he began to say something. And as I'm watching, the udder of the goat, it fills up with milk. And then they asked Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that, we asked you, do you have a goat that has milk? He said, no. Why? Because those the goats that have milk, they were Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayth. But this goat right here, it didn't have milk. And it wasn't supposed to have milk, but this is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can we go ahead and drink from this? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud goes, go ahead. Right? This is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How could I stop you from mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? A miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these two men, they drank from there, and then they offered me. And I said, it's a miracle? Another bismillah. And he drank as well. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he drank as well. And as they were leaving, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud asked these two men, who are you? And one said that I am Muhammad Rasulullah. And the other one said, I am Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said that these two men, they left. But then later on, I approached Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the more I thought about this religion, I thought about this miracle, and then I changed my life. And from the time that I changed my life and I came into the fold of Islam, I stopped being a shepherd for Arbaeen of Nawawi, and I became the shepherd for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That would take care of all the things of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I would always be there for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And because of this close connection with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala, he gained a special connection with the Quran. He gained a special connection with the Quran to the point that one time Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was walking with Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala. The three of them were walking, the friends, they're walking. We spoke about the hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I have two friends in the skies. I have two friends in the sky, Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam and Mikail alayhi salatu wasalam. And I have two friends on the earth, Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala. So one day all three of them were walking, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam heard someone reading Quran. And he said, that is Ibn Abd. That was the nickname of Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He said, that is Ibn Abd. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam snuck up behind him and he began to listen. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he was reading Quran, and he read Quran, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was just listening behind him. And when Abdullah ibn Mas'ud finished reading, he began to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for dua. He finished the salah, he began to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dua, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam behind him said, ask whatever you want, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept everything that you ask for. Ask for whatever you want, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, ask whatever you want, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept whatever you ask for. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he got up and he left, and when he was leaving, he told Abu Bakr and Umar that whoever wants to learn Quran, to read Quran, anything about Quran, then they should learn it from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala. Umar the next day, he comes to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and he says to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he congratulates him, and he tells him that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam yesterday, he said this about you, and he said this about you, and he listened to your Quran. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said to Umar that, I'm sorry, but I'm not surprised. I'm sorry, but I'm not surprised. Why? Because Abu Bakr already came and he already told me. Abu Bakr, he already beat you. He already beat you. Now, if you look at this fact right here, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is behind Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. He's in salah. And yet he has no idea who's behind him. The Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is behind him, and yet he is so lost in his salah. He's so lost in his connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he has no idea who's behind him. If you look at our salah, we know who's next to us, we know who's on this side. We know who's 2 people down, 3 people down, we also know people who's all the way at the end. And as soon as we go into ruku, we know who's behind us as well. We check who's behind us. And I commonly say that people, when they finish their salah, they have 2 salams. First salam at the clock, how long did the imam take? And second salam, who missed the rakat? Right? First salam, how long did the imam take? Second salam, who missed the rakat? Right? This is our salah. But here, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, his salah is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is behind him, and he has no idea that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is there. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not only there, but he's talking. He's saying, he recognizes Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and he's making dua for Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and he's saying to Umar and Abu Bakr that if someone wants to learn Quran, then they should learn it from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in another hadith says that if a person wants to learn Quran, they should learn Quran from 4 people. Number 1, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala, Salim bin Abi Hudayfa radiallahu ta'ala, Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu ta'ala, and Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu ta'ala. These 4 men. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Salim bin Huzayfa, Ubay bin Ka'b, and Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu ta'ala. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he sent Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu ta'ala to Madinah Munawwara later on to teach the religion. So 4 people out of the whole ummah, of the believers, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if you want to learn the message of the Quran, these 4. There was a great scholar by the name of Masruq, he was from the after Tabi'in, and he spent his life learning the hadith and learning the knowledge that the companions and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left behind. And he says that the whole knowledge of all of the companions, there are close to 124,000 companions. He says that if you were to squeeze all of this knowledge, it can be found in 6 people. It can be found in 6 people. And from those 6 people are Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, Ali radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu, Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu, and Abu Darda radiallahu anhu. From 124,000, if you squeeze this, you will find the whole knowledge of all the companions in these 6 people. And then even from these 6, if you squeeze it down even more, the knowledge of all of these 6, you'll find in 2 companions, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu and Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. This was the knowledge that they had. Amir al-Mu'mineen Umar radiallahu anhu, it was his habit that at night he wouldn't sleep when he became leader of the believers. He wouldn't sleep. He would walk around the city of Madinah Munawwarah making sure everything was okay, everything was good. And one night he was walking around the city of Madinah Munawwarah and he saw that a caravan is coming in. A caravan is coming in and is going towards Makkah al-Mukarramah. And he stopped this caravan and he asked them that, where are you coming from? Where are you coming from? And the caravan replies, Min Fajjin Amik. They ask, Umar asks, where are you coming from? And the caravan replies back and messages that we're coming from Min Fajjin Amik. Min Fajjin Amik means a very far away land, far away. And as Umar asks, where are you going towards? And the caravan replies, Ila Bayt al-Atiq. Ila Bayt al-Atiq. That we're going to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Umar he put 2 things together that they used these words and they rhymed the words in a way and they gave the answer in a way that it has to be somebody who is knowledgeable in the gathering. And Umar goes, okay, if this is the game that you want to play, let me test you, let me see how knowledgeable you are. And he asked them that, tell me, Ayyul Quran a'zam. From the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which ayah is the best? And the message came back, Allah wa la ilaha illa hu ayatul kursi. From all the verses of the Quran, this verse is the absolute best. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes Himself, He describes His power, He describes His might, and He describes His characteristics in this one ayah. Hazrat Umar he asks that, Ayyul Quran ahkam. Which verse of the Quran is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the absolute most clearest? He demands and He clearly tells you what He demands from you. And He tells you what to stay away from. And the message came back, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha. That this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded you to do. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you to do. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stopped you from this and He has stopped you from this. So Umar goes, okay, if this is this is what's going on. Ayyul Quran ajma. Which verse of the Quran it gathers is the most comprehensive? It's the most comprehensive verse. And the reply came back, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ. That whoever does the smallest bit of good will find it then. The most comprehensive verse is that if you do good, you'll find it in your book of deeds. And if you do any bad, whatever how small it may be, you'll find it in your book of deeds. So Umar goes, okay, Ayyul Quran arju. Which verse of the Quran is the most, that gives the most hope? Which verse of the Quran gives the most hope? And the reply came back, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. That, tell my servants, those that have done wrong upon themselves, do not lose hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tell my servants, those that have done wrong, if we ever have to see of this one verse, you see how much mercy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses every single word in this one ayah with love. He could have said that, those who committed sins, or those who didn't listen to me, those who disobeyed me. But He said they wronged themselves. They didn't want to, they shouldn't have, but somehow they did. لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Do not lose hope from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive all of your sins at once. Why? Because that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. Innahu al-ghafur rahim. He is the most merciful and He is forgiving. And this ayah is the ayah that has the most hope. And as Umar after getting this answer, he replies back to the caravan that Afikum Abdullah ibn Masud. He says, is Abdullah ibn Masud amongst you? There's only one person who can answer all these questions. There's only one person who can rapidly fire. This is Umar radiallahu anhu asking a question, right? If you look at our gatherings, we commonly we argue about silly things. What year was he drafted in? What college did he play for? What year was he MVP in? How many points did he score in this game? Here, Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he's asking him the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's asking some very deep questions. And the person is answering back, he's answering back perfectly. Until the point that Umar radiallahu ta'ala says, Afikum Abdullah ibn Masud? That Abdullah ibn Masud has to be amongst you. He says, yes, Abdullah ibn Masud is amongst us. And he's the one who's sending these bombs back at you. He's the one who's answering your questions. Right? So this shows the knowledge that Abdullah ibn Masud had. That he was able to answer to Rasulullah to the Umar radiallahu ta'ala. Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu anhu, he passed away during the Khilafah of the Uthman radiallahu ta'ala, around in 33 to 34 year of Hijri. Abdullah ibn Masud, he says that all of my desires that I had, they were completed. All of my desires that I had, they were completed except for one. He said it was the battle of Tabuk. And I came to a gravesite and I saw that Umar radiallahu ta'ala and Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, they were standing outside. And inside the grave was Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he asked Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala, give me the body. And Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala, they took the deceased's body and they handed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Abdullah, and the deceased was Abdullah bin Muzani. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, after taking the deceased, he lowered the deceased into the grave. And he made dua for the deceased, and he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, I am pleased with him, so you become pleased with him as well. I am pleased with him, so you become pleased with him as well. And Abdullah ibn Masud knows that. He went, oh Allah, I want a death like that. I want a death like that. My khatima, my ending should be like that. That, Abu Bakr and Umar lower me into the grave, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he is putting me to sleep, and when he's putting me to sleep, he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I'm pleased with this man, and I want you to be pleased with this man as well. And Abdullah ibn Masud said that that's one wish of mine that didn't come true. That's one wish of mine that didn't come true. In this hadith, Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu ta'ala, again, a great sahabi, a person that we see, who spent his life learning the deen of Islam, who sacrificed. Now if you look at two things that we said, that the nicknames that he had was Sahib al-Na'layn, Sahib al-Miswak. He was a person who carried the miswak of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a person who carried the shoes of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a person who carried the water of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in return, what did he receive? He received knowledge. So from this you learn that to gain knowledge is not only to study, it's not only to learn from the source of knowledge, but to gain knowledge, it also comes with a level of respect for the teacher and love for the teacher. Here the teacher was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the student was Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu ta'ala. And Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu ta'ala, he went above and beyond for the respect of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his teacher. And because of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with so much knowledge. And in our school, we've seen this so many times, that those students that were the most brightest, they were absolutely, the sharpest, you can say the sharpest knife in the drawer, right? They were extremely sharp, extremely intelligent, but when they didn't have any, respect for the teacher, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left them in no khair came out of them. No khair came out of them, and you have no idea we have no idea where these people are. And those students that weren't the brightest, that were just, learning as they went, but they had the utmost respect for the teachers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took so much, so much work of the deen from those people. So it's really important where you go out to learn the knowledge of Islam, you also remember that you have to be respectful to the teacher, and you have a duty to your teacher because of the knowledge that he's passing on to you, because of the ilm that he's passing on to you, the Quran, the Hadith that he's passing on to you. And there's a perfect example of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud because of this love and respect for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He went through a lot. That he would wake up before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he would stand there, and he will always be in and out and taking care of the small things of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And because of this, he is known as the man who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you want to learn Quran, then learn it from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala. And until now we were talking about Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and the state of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud thinks of this verse and that verse. Then the Mufassirin go into so much, the Muhaddithin, in every aspect of the deen, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's name comes up somewhere and somewhere. Right? So here in this hadith, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala, he says that I heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة. That verily everyone amongst you, you are created in the stomachs of your mother for 40 days as a nutfa, as a drop of liquid. Now in this verse, in this hadith, we are going to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He talks about the different stages of the khilqat of insan, of the creation of insan. And it starts off by, for 40 days, insan is a drop of liquid. ثُمَّ يَكُونُ عَلَقَةً مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, and after this, after 40 days of remaining as a drop of liquid, ثُمَّ يَكُونُ عَلَقَةً. Then from a drop of liquid you become a clot of blood. مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ, for another 40 days. ثُمَّ يَكُونُ مُضْغَةً مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ. Then you become a morsel of meat. A small piece of meat, it looks like a chewed up piece of meat for 40 days. ثُمَّ يُرْسِلُ إِلَيْهِ الْمَلَكُ فَيُنْفِخُ فِيهِ الرُّوحِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down an angel who blows the soul into this creation. وَيُكْتَبُ وَيُؤْمَنُ بِأَرْبَعِ كَلِمَةٍ. And this angel is commanded to write down 4 things. Number 1, بِقَدْبِ رِزْقِهِ. This person's sustenance. How much would this person risk? What would this person eat? What would this person earn? وَأَجَلِهِ. In his lifespan, how long would this person live for? وَعَمَلِهِ. And his deeds. وَشَقِيٌّ أَوْ سَعِيدٌ. And his manners and his characteristics, and whether this person will be shaqiyun or sa'idun, whether the person will be wretched or he will be pious. These 4 things are written down for this person. In this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he starts off by explaining the beginning of man. And later on in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he talks about the end of man. And in this one hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam covers the whole khilqat of insan, from the beginning all the way to the end. Now, if you look at the khilqat of insan, a human being goes through 7 different stages. According to the Quran, human being goes through 7 different stages. Number 1, we go through the stage of being a nutfa, a drop of liquid. Then from there we go to alaqa, a clot of blood. And from alaqa we go to mudghah, a piece of meat. Then another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes us out of our mother's wombs, and we are tifl. We are a child with the weaknesses and everything that just comes with. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He takes us out, ashuddakum, and He moves us to the next stage, the 5th stage, and that is where we become mature men. From young kids, we then become mature men, and then the final stage of this life, the 6th stage, is ثُمَّ يَكُونُ شُيُوخًا, that you become old and weak. And in the absolute last stage, the 7th stage, is that you become a maiden. And in the Quran, there's mention of these 7 stages from from nutfa to alaqa to mudgha, different, ashuddakum, shuyukha, and then the final stage is mayyit. Right? Now, if you look at this creation cycle of human being, that we start off with a drop of liquid, which is considered impure, that if you get on your cloth, you want to wash it off before you pray salah, and you have to take a bath, and you have to cleanse yourself. And the final stage of insan is that we are mayyit. Stage 7 is that we are mayyit, where the most beloved to us, and the people that love us the most, they no longer want us, and they give us away for free. They give us away to the earth for free, that we no longer have any use for this person. For every single human. We start off as a drop of liquid that's impure. We end up to be a piece of flesh that is impure once again. And in between these two stages, in between stage 1 and stage 7, insan somewhere thinks that they become the king of the world. Insan somewhere thinks himself that this world, it exists because of me. It spins because of me. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُم لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. That it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who takes you out of the wombs of your mother in the state that you do not know anything. لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا, that you have no idea. Now, if you look at the creation of insan, of human beings, and creation of any other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be a cat or a dog or any other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you compare these two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives these other animals some sort of aql, some sort of sense. But insan, we come out of our mother's womb with absolutely no sense. No, you take a baby, a puppy, or a kitten, and in front of it you put some. So you take a puppy, and in front of it you put some grass, or you put a bone. The dog will go to what? It'll go to the bone. It won't go to the grass. And you take a baby goat, and you put the baby goat in front of these two things. The goat will go towards the grass. It won't go to the bone. But if you put a human being, a baby human being, in front of these, what will it do? It'll take both of them, shove both of them in their mouth. It'll take the bone, try to put that in his mouth, and then it'll take the grass and try to put that in his mouth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'lamu shay'a. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took you out of the wombs of your mother in the state that you did not know anything. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave you وَجَعَلَ سَمْعَكُمْ وَأَبْصَارَكُمْ, that He gave you your hearing, He gave you your seeing. And so why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you all of this? So that you're thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you look back at your creation, and then you're thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But here through these stages, from stage 1 and stage 7, from a dirty drop of liquid to a piece of meat that your beloved, your loved ones don't want anymore, in between somewhere we come to this warped perspective, this warped thinking that we rule the world, and this world spins around because of us. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when we are in the wombs of our mother, that there are 3 different rooms that we are inside, 3 different darknesses that we are inside. And there is no doctor that goes in and fixes us, and puts our ears where they should be, and puts our eyes where they should be, our nose perfectly, our mouths, our hands, our feet. Where there is no light there is no other being there, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who takes care of the khilqa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the artist behind the masterpiece that we are. The Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. That you, my friends, you are a masterpiece. But the masterpiece that you and I are, in this creation of this masterpiece, there is no kamal of human being. There is no, we haven't done anything for this. But the kamal is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the artist. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us in the most perfect way possible. Then in the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that from these 3 stages, and if you look at these 3 stages, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said the first stage is for 40 days. Arbaeen of Nawawi. And the next stage, mithla dhalik, and the next stage, mithla dhalik. And these 40 days, 40 days, 40 days, they equal up to be 120 days. 4 months. Then 4 months into a person's existence, then فَيُنْفِقُ فِي الرُّوحِ. Then the ruh, the soul, is blown into the child. Touching on a little bit of a fiqh matter. In another hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that the ruh is blown in after 40 days. Not after 120 days, but after 40 days. And scholars that take this hadith, in their opinion, for abortion, the worst case scenario is abortion. But an abortion after the 40th day is impermissible. Why? Because the ruh has been put in. Right? Number one, the abortion should not take place, but let's say it gets to that stage. It gets to that stage that it's the last, it's the worst case scenario. Then after 40 days, the scholars that take this hadith, after 40 days, that's cutoff time. Why? The one hadith says that the ruh is put in after 40 days. But according to this hadith, the ruh is put in after 4 months. And that's why the scholars say that if it comes to that point, then it can happen before the 4 months. But then there has to be a extremely valid reason that the scholars have to give permission. You cannot become your own judge here. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in another verse says that what are you scared of? Why kill a child that is unborn? Why kill a child that is just newly born? Why kill a young child? Do you fear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it will die from hunger? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu yarzuqukum. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who feeds you, my friend. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gives you your clothes. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gives you your sustenance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who puts the roof over your house. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can feed you, then it can feed another stomach as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? In one verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it is in the responsibility of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to feed everything in this universe. It is the responsibility of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to feed everything in this universe. That you, insan, you have aql, you have a job, you have a house, you have a car. And because you have all of this, you fear that I can only have 2 children and I can't have 3. Why? Because a third child, I won't be able to pay for its college, I won't be able to pay for its food, things will get hard. Or you might have 3 children, you see the 4th one I cannot have. The 4th child, the 5th one I cannot have. Why? Because where am I going to pay my bills? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, other people in this world who are born without parents, who don't have parents at all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one He is our Rabb. He is our Rabb and He is the one who does our. But what is Rabb means? A being that takes care of something from a very young age. Our parents, they do our tarbiyah. They take care of us from a very young age until we are grown up. And even beyond our parents, they still take care of us. So Rabb means He is our nourisher, our sustainer. He is the one who takes care of us from a very young age. Not only if you have parents, but even if you don't have parents. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in one verse He says that, what are you worried about? Allah yarzuqukum wa iyyahum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one who gives you sustenance, and He will also give this child sustenance as well. So, in this description that the ruh is blown into this child after 4 months. Now, another question that comes to mind, that what is in this hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions 40 days. So what is the situation of the number 40 in Islam? Right? We have 40 hadiths that we're reading. And you commonly hear 40, 40, 40. Right? If you look at the Quran and the hadith, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He calls Musa alayhi salatu wasalam to the mountains for 40 days. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only in this hadith, but even in the verses of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the khilqat of insan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions each stage of 40 days. And Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was taken away from Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam for 40 years. So, from all of this evidence, it is easy to understand that the number 40 has something to do with changing ourselves. That the khilqat of insan, from nutfa to alaqa, it happened in 40 days. And the next 40 days, from alaqa to mudgha, another change is made. And then another change is made. That it takes 40 days to set a habit in. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in different hadiths, he makes mention of the number 40 when a person, he prays 40 salats. Right? A person goes to Medina to Munawwar and he prays 40 salats with Jamaat. Why? Because this will now set a habit, now make a change within ourselves. So this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam uses the number 40 here, and the people that work on bettering themselves, in tazkiyah, and purifying themselves, they commonly use the number 40, that you spend 40 days doing something, and the reason behind that is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this number 40 to show that the number 40, when a person does something in 40 days, it then changes a person. It then changes a person, and we learn this from this hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then later on, in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, وَيُؤْمَرُ بِأَرْبَعِ كَلِمَاتٍ, that 4 things are written for this person, بِقَتْمِ رِزْقِهِ, that his rizq, his sustenance, is written down. His sustenance is written down, that what will this person eat? A very famous saying in Urdu, that every single morsel, it has the name of the person who's eating it. And I remember our teacher Sheikh Bilal, when he would teach us about rizq, the hadith of rizq, he would commonly tell us a story. And he would say that in India, in one of the villages, there was a man who was eating biryani. He was eating some biryani. And as he took a morsel of biryani and he lifted it to his mouth, he had to sneeze. Now when you sneeze, a sneeze consists of 2 actions. One is the intake, the second is the out. So this man, as soon as he put this morsel of biryani into his mouth, he first, when he did this motion of intaking the air, a morsel, as 1 grain of rice, flew into his nose and got stuck and lodged into his nose. And because of his biryani, the masala and the spices in that, it began to burn. His nose started to water, and then his eyes started to water, and it became really uncomfortable for him. And our teacher tells us that this man, he went to the local doctor in this village, who was just namka doctor. He was just namka doctor, kamka doctor nahi, right? And he went to the doctor and he said, this is something's wrong. I've been feeling uncomfortable. My eyes are watering. My nose is watering. What should I do? And this doctor goes, it's very severe. You have to go to Delhi. Right? A very severe case. You have to go to Delhi. And he thinks to himself that it's going to take me so many days and in so much discomfort. I might as well go. And he gets on a train and he goes to Delhi. And Delhi, the climate in Delhi is different. It's a very humid climate, a very sticky and dusty climate. And as soon as this man gets to Delhi, he gets off at Delhi station, and because of the climate change, he sneezes once again. And when he sneezes the second time, he sees that the piece of rice flies out of his nose, and as soon as it hits the ground, a chicken comes and eats it. A chicken comes and eats it. Dane dane hota hai, khane wala khana. That 1 grain of rice was not written for him. It was written for a little chicken on all the way in Delhi, and he was just a carrier for that. It was just a carrier for that. Now, this story is not far-fetched. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we will eat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we earn. What we will in one hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he describes that our rizq is not what we earn, is not what's in our bank. It's not what the amount that we have in our bank, but our rizq is what we eat, what we consume, what we wear. Our rizq is everything that we use. And everything that is leftovers, that is not our rizq, that is the rizq of our inheritors. Right? So At this stage of time, when this child is 4 months into existence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands that the first thing that is written for this person is rizqihi. That is rizq, his sustenance. Number 2, wa ajalihi, his life. How long will this person live? Wa amalihi, his actions. What will his actions be? What will he do? Wa shaqiyun or sa'idun, will he be a wretched person or a righteous person? Now, this leads us to the topic of taqdeer. Topic of taqdeer. Right? Destiny, preordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we won't go into much detail here. Inshallah, we'll go into detail later on as well. But destiny, taqdeer, to understand this, you have to understand how human beings are. Right? If you have a friend, you know your friend over time. You get to know one another. If you have a child, a son or a daughter, over time you get to know the likes and the dislikes. When we had our second daughter, one time my wife had asked me to go get some milk for my daughter. And when the baby is young, you have to warm the milk up. So I went to the fridge, and I pulled out a bottle, and I poured some milk in there. And after pouring the milk, I was putting the milk back, and I saw that there was some juice as well. And I took out another bottle, and I poured some juice in there. And then I took these 2 bottles. Both came from the fridge, and the fridge temperature for both ingredients were the same. But then I only take one of the 2 bottles, and I put it into the fridge, in the microwave, and warm up. Why didn't I put the second bottle? Because I knew that when I put both of these options in front of my daughter, that my daughter would choose this one. She would choose the milk. I knew she wasn't going to choose the juice, but I wanted to give her both of the options. Right? I wanted to be a good father, and I wanted to give her both the options. So I took this bottle of warm milk, and I took this bottle of cold juice, and I went to my daughter in her crib, and I put both of them in front of her. You know what she took? She reached up and grabbed the milk. Right? She reached up and grabbed the milk. Now, was this a big karamat? Was this a big miracle on my behalf? Am I a big Allah? Am I a big sheikh? Am I a big buzurg? No, I'm not. Right? I didn't commit. There was no miracle there. I just knew my child's likes. And how long did I live with her? A year and a half. And I knew her likes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He speaks about insan, human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that I know you. And I know you better than you know yourself. I even know what's in your hearts. Wallahu ya'lamu ma fi qulubikum. The secrets that you lock away in your heart. The secrets that we have right here in this gathering, there are some people that are probably already thinking that, am I going to go home and what's going to be for dinner? Or some people are probably thinking that, what happened to the Bulls game? Did they beat the Nuggets or not? Or some people are thinking about the different things while they're in this gathering, and you haven't told anyone about these thoughts. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I know you better than you know yourself. I know the thoughts that run through you. I know the secrets that you have in your heart. I know you. Why? Because I have created you. And destiny is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows us so well that He knows what our choices will be. But yet He gives us the choices. I went into my class and I said that today we're going to have a quiz. And immediately like, right? And for a teacher, all they have to do is put the word pop in front of it, and they can give it whenever they want. Right? Pop quiz, whenever you want, just give it. So I went inside class and I go, pop quiz. And they're like, So I go, okay, you guys don't want to have the quiz? I said, no, we don't have the quiz. I go, fine. You and I'll do. I know you, because I've been teaching you for 2 to 3 years now. And I know who's going to study, I know who's not going to study. And I know who's going to fail, who's not going to fail. Right? After some time of teaching a class, you understand. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to give the quiz, I'm just going to give the grade. Right? You're passed. I know you're going to do good. You're Zara Badmash insan. I'm going to fail you. Right? And they said, Mr. Mubeen, at least give us a chance. Right? That's not fair, you're failing me. At least give me a chance. And this at least give me a chance is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us to the dunya. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew what our choices will be. And He knew if we would have been wretched or if we were pious. And if He wanted, He could have sent the pious to Jannah, and He could have sent the wretched, to Jahannam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just at least give us a chance. At least give us a chance. Let us earn that grade. Instead of just giving the grade, let us take the quiz and let us go through the quiz. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though He gives us a quiz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows. Allah Azza wa Jal, He already knows who's going to study, who's not going to study. Who's going to do good on this quiz, who's not going to do good on this quiz. Just like a teacher who has experience with these kids for 3 years, 4 years, 5, 6 years? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows us from the beginning of our creation. So in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, He says that it's written for that person that وَشَقِيٌّ أَوْ سَعِيدٌ, whether he'll be wretched or pious. فَوَاللَّهُ الَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, I swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is no God except for Him. إِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ لَيَعْمَلُ بِأَمْلِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ حَتَّى مَا يَكُونُ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَهَا إِلَّا زِرَاعٌ. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that sometimes what happens, that you live your life in a good way. You live your life in a righteous way, and you do the actions of Ahl Jannah. You do all the good things. حَتَّى مَا يَكُونُ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَهَا إِلَّا زِرَاعٌ. Until zira'a is described as a handspan. This much, or this much. Just very close. Right? That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says He does the actions of the people of Jannah until between him and Jannah is only a handspan. There's only a handspan away from him and Jannah. But when this happens, فَيُسْبِقُ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابِ. But then what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written for this person, that takes place. فَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمْلِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. Then in his last moments of his life, he does the actions of the people of Jannah. He changes his life in the last moments of his life. فَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمْلِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ فَيَدْخُلُهَا. And then he enters into Jannah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us here. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam carries on and he says, وَإِنَّ أَحَدُكُمْ لِيَعْمَلُ بِعَمْلِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ حَتَّى مَا يَكُونُ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَهَا إِلَّا زِرَاعٌ. Until there's a handspan between him and Jahannam. In the final moments of his life, فَيُسْبِقُ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابِ. Then the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it comes into play. فَيَعْمَلُ بِأَمْلِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ. And then he does good deeds. And he changes his way at the last moment of his life. فَيَدْخُلُهَا. And he enters into Jannah. And Jannah is only one way. Jannah is only one way. There's only entrance. There's only entrance, there's no exit. He enters in Jannah, he's in there for ever and ever. Now, there are two types of taqdeer. Right? There's taqdeer kulli, general taqdeer, and there's taqdeer sanawi, a yearly taqdeer. A yearly taqdeer. One is those general things of our life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And then there are those things that on Laylatul Qadr, they're written down for us. These are small things that can be changed. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us the ability to make a difference in our taqdeer. In one hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says that the dua of a human being, the dua of an insan is so powerful, it can change the taqdeer of Allah. It can change the taqdeer. How? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has some taqdeers that are left mu'allaq, that are hanging. They can fall on this side and they can fall on that side. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He writes down that if this person does dua, then let him go this way. And if he doesn't do dua, let him go that way. Right? If he's righteous, let him go this way. If he's wretched, let him go that way. So there are certain things in our taqdeer that are dependent on our amal. And from this last part of the hadith, a couple lessons that we can learn is, number one, a human being, a Muslim, should always be in the search of bettering himself. We should never be content that, I'm pious enough. I don't need to become more pious. I don't need to become, I don't need to be a better Muslim. Why? Because our outcome is unknown. A big question mark. We don't know what our outcome will be. And the second main lesson here is that it is impossible that a Muslim look down on another person. It is impossible that a Muslim look down on another person. Why is that? Because that person's outcome is a question as well. That to look at a sinner and to hate this person and think that you want, look at this person, he doesn't even come to the masjid. Or look at this person, he's like this. Or look at that person, he drinks alcohol. Or he does this sin, he does that sin. Right? To look down on another person, it's not possible for a believer. Why? Because a believer believes that it's all based upon the final moments of your life. Right? And in one hadith, Rasulullah says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ عَلَى الْخَوَاتِمِ. The actions are based upon the ending. It's not based upon the beginning, but it's based upon the ending. You can do something wrong, but then you can change your niyyah. You could be doing something and you can change your niyyah and get the reward for it. Or you could start off doing something good, but then change your niyyah and your niyyah becomes diluted and you could totally waste the action. You could totally put the action to waste. So, two things that in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he points towards that a person should always better himself. And most of the time, a person who lives his life in a good way, he will die on the same way. Why? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in one hadith says that the way that you live your life, the way you live your life is the way that you will die. And the way that you will die, you will be resurrected. If you live your life in a pious way, in a good way, then you will pass away in that state. If you live your life, in sajda, in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while reading the Quran, then you'll pass away in that same state. And the hadith says, وَكَيْفَ تَمُوتُونَ تُحْشَرُونَ. The way that you die will be the way that you're resurrected. One of our teachers, his father, Mawlana Zia al-Haq, his father, Mawlana Islam al-Haq, he used to eat pan. And he used to tell us that when I die, I'm going to have pan in my mouth. Right? He had a very, he always had pan, and he would say, when I die, I'll have pan in my mouth. And it happened that, and again, he was our teacher, and he would spend his day teaching the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and in the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the final moments of his life, he was in Madinah Munawwarah, and he was inside Masjid Nabawi, and he was by the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he had pan in his mouth. And when the angel of death came to him, he fell into sajda, and he passed away. Right? The way you live your life is the way that you will die. If you live your life in good deeds, then you will die. You will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will leave this world while you're doing good deeds. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. That if we live our life in a bad way, we're committing sins, then it is very possible that we leave this world in a way that we are still engrossed in those same sins. And now imagine this, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, وَكَيْفَ تَمُوتُونَ تُحْشَرُونَ. That either you can be resurrected on the Day of Judgment in that sajda in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe with the pan in your mouth, but in the sajda in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you can be resurrected in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the state that you are committing a sin. Right? If you live your life that you are intoxicated, it is very likely that you might pass away while you're intoxicated. And when you're resurrected, you'll be resurrected in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that day where you will be unclothed and barefooted, and you'll be directly in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at that day, can you imagine being intoxicated in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that the way you live your life is the way that, in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that the way a person will live his life, but sometimes at the end, there is a change. A change takes place. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was going for a battle, and a man came on a horse from the opposite direction. He came from the opposite direction, and he came through the army of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam all the way until he came from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he got off his horse, and he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Are you Muhammad bin Abdullah? Are you Muhammad bin Abdullah?" And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Yes, I am Muhammad bin Abdullah. I am Muhammad the son of Abdullah." Then he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Are you the one who claims to be the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?" He says, "Yes, I am the one who is the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." He says, "Put your hand forward." Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam put his hand forward, he held his hand and goes, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. And he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Because I wanted to accept Islam, he accepts Islam. He asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where are you going? He goes that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replies back, we're going in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This man says that if this is the case, then you will find me all the way in the front. I will be in the front. This man just accepted Islam and he's willing to give his life for the sake of Islam. And he jumps back on top of his horse and he rides all the way to the front. And while riding to the front, his horse trips, he falls off the horse and he dies. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while burying this man, he said, this man is extremely lucky. He is extremely lucky. Why? Because he lived the life the way he wanted to. And when he was about to, this hadith, what does the hadith say? That sometimes a man lives his life with the amal of Ahl Nar. Right? Then, فَيُسْبِقُ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابِ. Then the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it takes effect. فَيَعْمَلُ بِأَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ. Then he does the deeds of Ahl Jannah. And he changes everything. فَيَدْخُلُهَا and he enters Jannah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, this man right here, he has made it. Why? Because he lived his life the way he wanted to, and in the final moments of his life, number one, he became a Sahabi. A status that you and I can never reach. And number two, he became a Shaheed, and he passed away in the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So from this hadith, the take-home point is that it is extremely, extremely important that you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a good khatimah. That you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, give us death on Islam. Make our final day our best day. When we are extremely close to you, that's when we're ready to go. Take us when we're close to you. Take us when we're in salah. Take us when we're in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Give us the kalima at the time of our death. That save us from a death that is all of a sudden. Save us from a death that we're not prepared for. So it's very important that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for dua. Number one, to give us a khatima al-khair. And number two, that to take us when we're in the state that we're remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That once again, this hadith is narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is from those companions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that if you want to learn the Quran, learn it from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, his legs might be skinny, but they are weightful in front of the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we learn from the life of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that he sacrificed Allah for the sake of the love for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his teacher, and he became the man who used to carry on the water, the biswak, the small things of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And because this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with a lot of knowledge, that he became a master of Quran, he became a master of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he had this special connection with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that the companion would think that he was from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whereas he wasn't from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala, he narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that our khilqat, the way that we are made, our creation, it starts from a drop of blood for 40 days. Then after that we become a clot of blood, and from a drop of liquid to a clot of blood, and then from a clot of blood we became a morsel of meat. And each stage is 40 days, 40 days, 40 days. And then after this an angel is sent, and this angel blows a ruh into us, and now we get existence. And after this existence we become an actual human being. And when we become an actual human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands 4 things are written for us. Number 1, our rizq. Number 2, our ajal, our life, how long will we live and where we will live, where we will pass away and where we will die. And number 3, our a'mal, our deeds, what will we do. And number 4, shaqiyun or sa'idun, will be righteous or will be wretched. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the same hadith, he said that sometimes what happens, that a man, he lives his life بِعَمَلِ أَهْلِ Jannah, until between him and Jannah is just a handspan away and he can enter Jannah. But then the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes place, and then this person, he changes his life in the final moments. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. He does the action of the people of Jahannam until فَيَدْخُلُهَا, he goes into Jannah. And the opposite way around, sometimes it happens, we see this all the time, that there are so many people in the last stages of their life, they say that I want to accept Islam, and they accept Islam on the beds of the hospital, and they leave this world. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that sometimes what happens is that a person, he lives his life and he acts upon the actions of the Ahl Jannah, Ahl Jahannam, Ahl Nar. And then in the final moments of life, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes his effect, and then this person changes his life in the last moments. فَيَعْمَلُ بِأَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ فَيَدْخُلُهَا, and this person, he enters into Jannah. And we learn from this two main things. We learn from this couple of great lessons. Number one, that a Muslim should not be content. He should always look to better himself, and a Muslim should not look down on another person. Why? Because our akhirah and that person's akhirah are unknown. We don't know what will happen. And a Muslim should, once again, he should make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us, and everybody here, and all our family, a khatima al khair, an ending that is at the best of time. That when we are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the final words from our mouths will be the kalima la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that we leave this world testifying. Why? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, innamal a'malu al khawatim, that actions are based upon the endings. Subhanallah, bihamdihi, subhanallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.